Hello everyone, this is Yeri of Astrology Healing Arts, here to share insights regarding the astrology of February 2026, a month that many of us have been waiting for and discussing over the past couple of years that has finally arrived. If you're new to my work, my focus is on psychic and physical well-being as well as self-defense. I'd also like to mention that I'm going to be starting an online course this month on February 10th that is called Break the Cycle, Reclaim Your Soul, an 8-week program for recovering from narcissistic abuse using astrology as a guide and tool for insight. I have a few spots still open. If you're interested, you can sign up on my website, astrologyhealingarts.com. And if you have questions about this course, reach out to me, hello@astrologyhealingarts.com. So this month of February, we're really going to need to be very vigilant and ready for anything. The astrology is extremely intense, and the alignments are going to expose what's hidden, suppressed, repressed, denied, and probably shocking on a massive scale to a great majority of people. We are at a major turning point in the collective, and so revelations and startling realizations are surfacing. Things are going to go by very quickly, and there's going to be a lot of unexpected changes. Blood pressure is on the rise. There might be more frequent headaches and migraines, agitation and anger, especially in the beginning of the month. So right off the bat, we come in with several planets in Aquarius and a full moon. We are at the cross quarter of the year, and this full moon in tropical Western astrology is 13 degrees of Leo. So we have this burst of creative energy. It's very heart-focused. It's very passionate, but also it could be problematic, and I'll explain why. The full moon is in an opposition to not only the sun. A full moon is always when the sun and moon are opposite, but Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Pluto are in the mix. So it is extremely electrically charged and dramatic and explosive, potentially, if not directed carefully. And so there could be some violent outbursts, temper tantrums. This is a pretty warm degree in the zodiac, getting pretty hot actually, in opposition to all of these planets in Aquarius. And speaking of narcissism, this type of behavior is making itself widely known at this time, as it has been leading up to this full moon. People are really showing the ugly side of their character. But also, it's not just that. Obviously, not everyone is narcissistic to that degree, and so the fun-loving and creative aspect of Leo is also emerging. And there's great potential if people know how to properly, direct this energy. So, blood circulation and breath all become very important, as does hydration. Electrolytes can be so important for the proper distribution of water throughout the body. This is something throughout this entire month to keep in mind, because there's a very electrical, Uranian sort of quality to this month that could throw a lot of people off. The entire bioelectrical system is going to be sensitized, times 10. And speaking of Uranus actually is the second ruler of Aquarius, and it turns or stations direct on February 3rd, just a couple days after this full moon, but it's already going to be felt very strong, and it's going to be 27 degrees, just 1 degree away from the fixed star Algol, which is also known as head of Medusa. This was exact last year during April, and we have these lingering themes around the head and face. So some of the issues that people are struggling with are TMJ, bruxism, which is grinding the teeth during sleep, thyroid issues, again, migraines and things like this. These are things that there are many indications of, many testimonies of throughout this month. for people who are, predisposed to these sorts of conditions. Also, dizziness, having your equilibrium thrown off. In some cases, the equilibrium is related to what's happening in the ear. So these are all just areas to be aware of for people who feel vulnerable to those sorts of conditions. And then on the 5th, Mercury squares Uranus, and this could bring up a lot of nervous energy, spasmodic conditions. It can also intensify EMF sensitivity, and it can really speed up and increase the amount of communications, especially online or during travels. But again, it can also, put people in situations where they are moving too quickly, speaking too quickly, and they get themselves into trouble. Just a couple days after that, on the 8th, Venus will square Uranus. So this could affect blood sugar levels, and it could stir up some strange cravings that people have for different foods, or especially sweets, because Venus does rule sweets. And a lot of wild hormonal shifts for certain women that are already experiencing, instability on that level. So be aware of that actually throughout this entire month, because it can just throw people off in a lot of, if they're not ready, if they're not already paying attention to these areas, they might feel more like they're just being blown hither and thither by these really radical influences. On the 13th, Saturn enters Aries. We had a little bit of a preview of what this would look like last year during May. It entered Aries on May 24th, 2025 until September 1st. Then it went back into Pisces, so it'll be re-entering Aries on February 13th until April 12th, 2028. And so during this entire transit, some of the things that we may need to look out for, again, for those who are predisposed, headaches, eye aches, infections of the head, sinus, eyes, even cloudy mind, cloudy mental state leading to depression, heavy thoughts. Saturn is a pretty heavy hitter, and Aries, it's not really specifically about the emotions, but because it's going to be in a conjunction with Neptune, which I'll get to very soon here, it could lead to some, pretty dark thoughts for many people. There could be tooth infections, tooth pain. So, if those are the types of things that you're dealing with, I like to use clove oil. Sometimes I will just chew on cloves. I've done that since I was a teenager. I don't know what it is. I just love the taste of them. But for those who don't like the texture and taste, you could also try oil pulling with coconut oil and a drop of tea tree, something like this, along with your, regular dental practice. On the 15th, the sun will square Uranus, exactly. But this is going to be a very important aspect to pay attention to, not just on that day, but for a few days before and a few days after. So again, we are looking at all of these, possible injuries and arguments and electrical surges or spasms. Be careful to, not spend too much time on a screen, and be careful around technology, because there could be some explosions and glitches that could either be fatal or just, damaging in some way. This is a good time to be wearing your shungite, and just also be very cautious on the road, because road rage is a thing that will be intensified probably. A lot of reckless drivers, and this is a really important one to just pay attention to, because again, I feel that this sun squaring Uranus is going to have major repercussions on a grand scale, and what we can do individually is just just pay attention to how is this coming up? How is this coming up for, like, how is this coming up in my chart, in my life, in my relationships, in my health? And just as we can address that on a smaller scale, it means that we're better equipped to handle whatever happens, or even to, shift, we can sort of prevent certain accidents from happening by being more mindful of how we are moving and interacting with others. And physically, I was thinking along the lines of seaweeds for helping to detoxify from radiation and heavy metals this month. Sea moss gel is also a popular new item, and I've enjoyed using sea moss gel. Some of them taste really good, actually. And, the day after, we have a trine from Mercury to Jupiter, which is a helpful influence in harmonizing our thoughts and our plans, and, giving us a greater sense of awareness around our nervous system, helping us to be prepared for all of these changes that are coming, that have been building up. The next day, on the 17th, this is the long-awaited annular solar eclipse at 28 degrees of Aquarius. It is still in a square with the sun. So all of those things that I said about sun squaring Uranus becomes heightened because of this eclipse. And this is the Chinese New Year of the Fire Horse. And thankfully, because the Year of the Snake has been brutal, there has been a lot of shedding, endings, loss, emotional turmoil, psychosis, and also a feeling of just energy that lags and drags. And now things are going to pick up. We have that energy of fire and the horse, which is about movement and progress. And this eclipse is going to reverberate for many months, years to come. This eclipse is about lighting up our inner truth. And it's about making radical decisions, taking new directions in every way, shape, and form. And so we really are looking at, again, this is the turning point. This is a major, major turning point. I cannot emphasize this enough. Physically, we are going to need some support. Some of us more than others, people who have autoimmune disorders or highly sensitive people like myself, we have to always look in every single category of life for how to cope with the ups and downs, the twists and turns, the inner and outer manifestations of things. So some key remedies that I've highlighted: astragalus root, which is an herb that is often taken for immune system support, heart, blood sugar regulation, several other good things. I also like Solomon's seal, which is anti-inflammatory, used as an expectorant, used to help with supporting bones and connective tissues, heart, and blood sugar, and also sometimes used as a sedative, which we will probably need during this month. The cell salt that corresponds with the energy of Aquarius is called natrum muriaticum, and it's often used for grief, shock, electrolyte balance, dry eye syndrome, dryness overall, and headaches that come from the sun or heat. There are a couple of flower essences that I also like to mention that I think are particularly relevant to this energy that we are experiencing. One is corn flower essence for increasing body awareness, and it's also used for situations in which we are faced with a lot of energy from other people, like people who live in big cities, or people who feel claustrophobic or just overly affected by the energy of other people, or people who live outside of their bodies, above and or beside themselves. Helps them to come back into center and ground, and just become aware of the messages that the body is sending. Also water violet, which is a traditional Bach flower essence, and it's used for sharing our gifts with others, overcoming a sense of aloofness and separation, and just being able to harmonize with groups. Not just any group, though, the right groups of people that reflect our values as well. There's going to be a conjunction between Venus and the North Node, 8 degrees of Pisces. They are trining Jupiter. This overall should be positive in that it helps us to further align with our values, especially those values that are universal and spiritual, sort of, connected with something that all of us generally want. We want happiness. We want peace. We want to be free from suffering and struggle and war. So when we can really align our actions with that ideal and that vision, we can make a greater impact in the world. It's not really about going out there and changing other people. It's about how we are within ourselves, within our souls. And so this particular alignment can assist us in understanding that sort of the microcosm versus the macrocosm and how things are connected. But if people are not careful, this particular aspect could also, produce overindulgence in different areas that, where people have addictions, because addiction is something that we are looking at as well this month. And possibly for some people, it could be the time that they finally break a long-standing addiction or addictions. The next day, Sun enters Pisces. And so there's a lot of moist and cold conditions that could be coming up during this time. So I emphasize draining the lymphatic system in some way. On the 20th, this is a long-awaited aspect between Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune come into their exact degree conjunction, 0 degrees of Aries, and this is the time to look at, okay, on a health level, what this means is that some types of disease and some types of mental illness could be at their early stages. And for some people, it's going to be probably one end of the spectrum or the other, in that something is finally phasing out, coming to an end. Something has already been addressed during Saturn's transit through Pisces, or it's going to progress to a deeper level, or something is going to start to reveal itself. So an onset to some sort of, condition. 0 degrees is the beginning of something. And it's for some people, this could be subtle, but I don't think this is going to be very subtle, but it might be confusing. That's the problem because of Neptune's presence there, because Saturn is about structure and foundation. It's what gives us a sense of stability in our lives, but Neptune does the opposite. It erodes the foundation. So it's possible that it can come in with some very sneaky infections in different parts of the face and head, like in the eyes or ears or nose, mouth. It's something to be aware of for those who are predisposed. I like the herb eyebright for, general care of the eyes. I like ginger for overall circulation, which can sometimes also help to alleviate tension in the head, like headaches. And feverfew as well is often used for that. Peppermint essential oil. I love peppermint essential oil. It is, to me, a lifesaver. So it makes sense they called the candy lifesavers. Peppermint is a lifesaver for so many different things, but if you are allergic or you have problems, obviously don't use it. But I think it's one of those essential oils to have on hand for myriad conditions, including headaches. On the psychic level, beware of hidden attacks, hidden enemies, hidden agendas. These will be exposed also in the near future if they aren't already evident, but Neptune is a sneaky influence. So when you combine that with Saturn, what is Saturn? It's about authority figures. It's about, both negative and positive. So this would definitely relate to dictatorship and government. So we can expect on a grand scale that there are more schemes and agendas yet to be revealed. But for those of us who do a lot of research on that topic, this isn't really that shocking. I think it's more shocking for the people who are new to this, to these areas of study and just, observation. It's getting harder to ignore. But yeah, there's going to be a need for being vigilant of what is the motivation of the structure, the organization, who is taking the lead, and are they leading with integrity? Some people are, but some people aren't, and that's going to be something that will have to be dealt with in the coming weeks, in the coming months. On the 22nd, we have a trine. I mentioned that trine, but it's exact. Venus is trine Jupiter. So this is the bit of grace that we are given in the midst of very forceful influences. On the 25th, Mercury turns retrograde, 22 degrees of Pisces. So we will need to continue supporting our immune system, physical and or spiritual. Physically, looking at the areas of the feet and legs, going up to the knees. We might be dealing, again, with these issues with authority figures that, like things coming back, review around what happened back then, and now it needs to be resolved or released. Continue to work on draining lymphatic system. On the 27th, the Sun will be in a conjunction with the North Node, just as Venus was during the eclipse. And this is a very important day to pay attention to. Just this whole last week of February, because Mars is also squaring Uranus, and this could be a very destabilizing influence. It could lead to accidents, electrical shock, seizures, danger from explosives, bizarre symptoms and experiences. With all the Pisces energy too in there, Venus will be conjunct Mercury at 22 degrees of Pisces. There may be fainting spells, out-of-body experiences, extreme fatigue, loss of consciousness, going into a coma, if conditions are ripe. So be aware of this. It's wise to stay indoors, meditate, during that time. Take some time off if you can, because it's very sensitizing influence. And Mars and Uranus, again, don't tend to usually bring out the best in people, although it's possible that, there could be some real, genius inventions coming out. And it's also possible that this alignment could be directed toward getting a lot of different things accomplished, because it could be energizing, but it's a pretty tricky one to deal with. So do be aware of that on all different levels, body, mind, and spirit. And I'm going to summarize now with just saying, because we are at this very important turning point in the year, in our lives as a collective, there's an opportunity to break habits and patterns that no longer serve us, self-defeating habits and patterns. And the reason why I, jumped on the narcissistic abuse recovery bandwagon, because this is a very popular but important topic to address right now. The world, the people in the world are feeling more, not only more lost than ever, infuriated, and coming to terms with the fact that they've been misled, they've been gaslighted, they've been abused pretty much their whole lives, and it's ancestral. It's not just this generation of people. Narcissistic abuse has been around for centuries, and there's probably more of it now because there are more people now than ever before. It never used to be as widespread of a problem, but we have a lot of different people now on this planet, and there's a lot of noise, and thanks to the internet, there's a lot of noise that we shouldn't even be dealing with. This is not even human. This is, we are entering the age of transhumanism. And so this adds different layers to this existing problem. And because people have become more aware of the issue of narcissistic abuse, that means we've come closer to being able to break a pattern. And what I am focusing on in my work, it's not only the psychological aspects of abuse, but the psychic and spiritual, because there's definitely a spiritual component in narcissistic behavior and abuse, and on both sides, the person, the abuser, and the recipient of the abuse. There's a relationship that it's it kind of fits hand in glove. So what we want to do is to become unfit for the narcissistic experience. And how do we do that? Well, there's many different steps and stages to this process. Honestly, it's not going to be simple, but it's definitely possible. And the time has come to do this work. And so I'm combining this area of psychology and spiritual work with astrology, because I think astrology can give enormous insights into these issues. Okay, so one more thing I wanted to summarize with Saturn and Neptune. We're also looking at deficiencies, atrophy, what areas of the body or our lives are breaking down, and how do we address this immediately so that we can avoid some deeper problems later on. And some of the different types of modalities that I enjoy, or have enjoyed in the past, I should say, cranial sacral work. Some people might be drawn to polarity therapy, or osteopathic work, working with the spine in different ways, doing stretches, doing different forms of exercise. We all have a different body type, so there's not, just like with medicine, there's no cure-all, there's no one pill that suits all, there's no one exercise for all people. I do not believe that yoga is healthy for all people. Just like, not everyone's drawn to martial arts. So I really think that it's time to make a commitment for the well-being on individual levels, because Aries, the energy of Aries, gets us in touch with, who we are, who's the I, what do I want, what do I represent, who am I, what do I need? It's kind of a selfish, you could say narcissistic influence in and of itself, but not all narcissism is necessarily bad or evil, especially if you look at it from the perspective of babies, infants. We come into this world rather self-centered, right? And then we learn about other people and, how to listen and be courteous and all of that sort of thing. So having a sense of self is not bad, but keeping that in check is important. That's what I've got for February 2026. Thank you for listening. I don't ask often, but I appreciate your support in liking and or subscribing if you enjoyed this work. And if you'd like to book a reading, please visit my website, astrologyhealingarts.com.